right now, in the precise 3 seconds before you say the words, I am sorry, your brain is doing something completely counterintuitive.
It really is, yeah. Because, well, we usually frame an apology as this polite, albeit kind of awkward social convention.
Right?
But if you look at the neuroscience of conflict, a poorly delivered apology, the kind where you mumble or you rush your words or get slightly defensive, that actually activates the exact same threat response in the listener's brain as a direct verbal insult.
Wait, like an actual insult.
Mhm.
So instead of throwing water on the fire, a bad apology is basically pouring gasoline on it. Your brain literally registers it as an active attack. That is wild.
It's totally wild, and it happens beneath our conscious awareness.
Which is exactly why we're doing this deep dive today. Our mission is to unpack the psychology of apologizing, using our sources on the apology art to figure out how to say sorry in a way that actually repairs trust and protects your own self-respect.
Right, without making you look weak.
Exactly, because if a bad apology acts like an insult, delivering a good one feels a lot like diffusing a bomb. If you cut the wrong wire, if you use a slightly wrong tone or the wrong phrasing, the whole situation blows up in your face, even if your intentions were genuinely good.
That bomb diffusal analogy hits the nail on the head. I mean, when you are holding those metaphorical wire cutters, your heart is pounding.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's a biological reason for that. The apologizer's brain is literally in a state of threat. Think about what happens beneath the surface of a classic bad apology, like, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Oh, the worst.
Right. But the person speaking is actually bracing for rejection. They are anticipating blame and emotional pain.
And their body language just completely betrays them, right? Like the hidden signs start leaking out everywhere. You see a slightly raised pitch in their voice. They rush to finish the sentence. Their eyes dart away to avoid direct eye contact.
Exactly. The apologizer feels so viscerally uncomfortable that their biological instinct is just to escape the interaction as fast as humanly possible.
Which fundamentally breaks the entire purpose of the apology in the first place.
It really does. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, an apology is a social signal. Its singular job is to communicate to the other person's nervous system that it is safe to lower its guard around you again. You're basically signaling, hey, I am no longer a threat to you.
But if the apologizer is rushing and avoiding eye contact and acting defensive, they are essentially projecting high-anxiety threat signals.
Right, which keeps the listener's nervous system on high alert. Even if the listener politely nods and says, apology accepted, the biological repair didn't actually happen.
Wow. So the words occurred, but the nervous system's never synchronized into a state of safety.
Yeah, the listener still feels uneasy around you, even if they can't rationally explain why.
Okay, wait, I have to push back on the biology here for a second. Let's say we know we messed up. We dropped the ball. We said the hurtful thing. Why does our brain act like we are the ones under attack? Why are we in a threat state when we caused the problem?
Well, the American Psychological Association points to a massive distinction here between two specific emotions, and that's guilt versus shame.
Okay.
Guilt focuses purely on a specific action. It says, I did a bad thing. And that is incredibly healthy because it keeps the problem external. You can fix an action, you can make amends for an action.
But shame is different.
Right. Shame attacks the whole self. It says, I am a bad person.
Oh, I see. So if your brain interprets a mistake as evidence that you are fundamentally flawed, it triggers an existential threat response. You aren't just apologizing for being late. You feel like you're fighting for your basic worth.
Exactly. And shame produces intense defensiveness. When you feel ashamed, you aren't really trying to repair the relationship anymore. You're subconsciously trying to protect your ego.
Which produces those spiraling, exhausting apologies, right?
Yeah.
Where the person beats themselves up so much that the injured party suddenly has to pause and comfort the person who hurt them.
Yes, the classic role reversal. It's exhausting for everyone.
So if this shame response is so deeply biological, it makes me wonder if we're just doomed to be defensive forever. Or does our brain get better at processing this as we age? Is a 20-year-old biologically worse at apologizing than a 50-year-old?
It's a great question, and the data breaks this down into fascinating life stages. Age actually plays a massive role in how we process that shame. Take someone between 20 and 28, for example.
Okay.
At that stage of neurological and social development, you are actively forming your sense of identity. So because your identity isn't fully solidified yet, every apology can feel like it is permanently defining who you are in front of your peers.
Oh, wow. So the stakes feel incredibly high because admitting a flaw feels like cementing a crack in your foundation.
Exactly. It feels permanent.
What happens when they move into their late 20s and early 30s then? Does it get easier?
Paradoxically, it often gets harder before it gets better.
Wait, really?
Yeah, between 28 and 35, you actually hit peak self-doubt. This is when career pressure, serious relationships, starting a family, and financial stress, they all tend to converge simultaneously.
That makes a lot of sense. You're just trying to keep your head above water, so any criticism feels like a tidal wave.
Right, the mind isn't broken here, it's just responding to intense pressure. When your cognitive load is maxed out by life stressors, finding the emotional bandwidth to process an ego-threatening apology without getting defensive becomes incredibly difficult.
What about later on, like 35 to 45?
In that window, communication patterns tend to become deeply fixed. People get used to their own defensive habits. It's kind of the "this is just how I am" phase. But neuroscience shows the brain remains highly neuroplastic, so highly changeable at every age. You are never actually locked in.
Which leads right into the 45 and older demographic, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
That's often when the most profound mindset shifts happen regarding accountability, right?
Often, yeah, because the motivations shift dramatically. After 45, people's reasons for wanting to change become clearer and more urgent, like desiring a genuine, transparent relationship with their grown children, or repairing a long-term marriage that has grown cold.
The ego matters less, and the connection matters more.
Precisely. It becomes prime time for repairing old ruptures.
So we're talking about the macro timeline of our lives, but we also need to look at the day-to-day physiology. Because earlier, we noted that the body drives the conversation. How much does our daily physical state dictate our ability to say sorry?
Oh, it completely runs the show. Your ability to apologize is deeply tied to physiological regulation. Consider sleep deprivation, for instance.
I'm terrible when I haven't slept.
Right. A lack of sleep directly reduces activity in your prefrontal cortex. And that is the exact part of your brain responsible for empathy, perspective taking, and impulse control.
So without sleep, you are neurologically primed to be a jerk, even if you desperately want to be understanding.
Exactly. And chronic stress does the exact same thing. High levels of the stress hormone, cortisol, physically narrow your perspective. You get tunnel vision on your own survival rather than the other person's feelings.
I imagine even basic things like hydration matter then.
Absolutely. Hydration, blood sugar stability, they play a quiet but critical role. Because a dysregulated body is always going to produce a dysregulated conversation.
Honestly, trying to deliver a nuanced, empathetic apology while you are sleep-deprived and running on high cortisol, it sounds like trying to perform delicate brain surgery while wearing thick oven mitts. You just aren't equipped for the precision required.
That's a brilliant way to put it. Taking those oven mitts off means getting rested and stabilizing your nervous system first.
Right.
And once you've done that, once your body feels safe, you can actually look at the hard science of what makes the words work.
Right, the actual blueprint.
Yeah, researchers at Ohio State University did a landmark study on this. They wanted to know what specific components an apology needs to actually be accepted and to effectively rebuild trust.
So if the brain treats a bad apology like an insult, there must be a specific combination of words that acts like a neurological, all-clear signal to the listener's amygdala. What are the magic components?
They identified 3 vital elements. To signal complete safety, an apology must include an acknowledgement of responsibility, an offer of repair, and an explicit request for forgiveness.
Wow. Okay. Acknowledgement, repair, forgiveness.
Right. If you are missing these, the listener's brain doesn't register the apology as complete, even if you clearly say the words, "I am sorry."
Let's break that down for everyone. Acknowledgement of responsibility tells them you see reality the exact same way they do. The offer of repair shows you are invested in fixing it. And the request for forgiveness hands the power back to them.
Exactly. It restores the balance.
And this connects directly to the Gottman Institute's research on relationships, which I find incredibly liberating. They found that long-term relationship health isn't about avoiding mistakes in the first place.
Far from it. The Gottman research shows that how a rupture is repaired matters significantly more than whether the rupture happened at all.
That's huge.
It is. Couples who develop strong repair skills build deeply resilient relationships, regardless of how often they fight. The repair process itself builds the trust. It shows you can survive conflict together.
But I need some clarification on those Ohio State components, though.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement, repair, and request for forgiveness. Does every tiny, everyday apology need all 3 of those? Like, if I accidentally bump into you in the hallway, Do I need to offer a formal request for forgiveness, or is this framework just for massive, life-altering mistakes?
No, no, it absolutely scales to the severity of the mistake. You don't need a three-part thesis for stepping on someone's toe.
Okay, good.
But there is a massive myth here that the research busts, and that's the idea that a real deep apology requires a lengthy explanation. Studies actually show that shorter, specific apologies are rated as far more sincere by the listener.
Really, just keep it short.
Yes. Because if you talk for too long, it almost inevitably starts to sound like justification. You're basically trying to explain your way out of the accountability.
Ah, I see. Length feels like defense.
Exactly. So to translate this academic research into the real world, behavioral researchers have mapped out a 10-step blueprint for structuring an apology in real time without falling into those defensive traps.
Let's go through the most critical ones. The very first step goes right back to that shame versus guilt distinction we talked about. Separate the action from your identity.
Right.
You have to actively remind yourself that acknowledging a harmful action is not a confession that you are a fundamentally bad person. You are isolating the behavior.
Which is so hard to do in the moment. But step 2 is purely structural, and it's arguably the most important one on the list. Drop the word but entirely.
I love how this is framed in the source material. The word but acts essentially as an emotional backspace key.
It really does.
The listener's brain literally deletes every nice, accountable thing you said right before it. If I say, "I'm sorry I yelled, but you were frustrating me," the listener's brain only processes, "You were frustrating me." The apology is gone. It just vanished.
It functions as a complete emotional erasure. So step 3 is about naming the specific impact, not just the action. So instead of just saying, "I'm sorry I was late," you say, "I'm sorry I was late, and I know that made you feel like I don't value your time."
Oh, that's so much better.
Right. You have to validate their emotional experience, which proves you are actually paying attention to them, not just your own guilt.
And step 4 ties back to keeping it short, right? Resist the urge to explain yourself in the same breath. Apologize first. If an explanation is genuinely necessary, offer it much later, separately, once the trust has started to settle.
Yes, separate the two. And plus, you have to check your body language before you speak, because humans trust nonverbal signals way more than verbal ones. You need to let your shoulders drop, make eye contact, uncross your arms.
Basically, project that safety we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You also have to allow space for their response without immediately defending yourself. And this is incredibly difficult for people who grew up viewing apologies as a loss of power.
Oh, for sure.
There's a story in our sources that perfectly illustrates the struggle. It's about a 42-year-old construction manager named Michael. Now, he grew up in a family where apologies were fundamentally viewed as weakness. His father rarely apologized, and when he did, it was always laced with excuses.
So Michael carried that generational conditioning straight into his own marriage. When conflict happened, he defaulted to explanations and justifications because simply saying sorry felt like losing a battle.
Right. And his turning point came when his wife told him she didn't need perfection. She just needed him to be able to say the words, "I was wrong," without immediately launching into a defense.
Wow.
He described making that change as one of the hardest mindset shifts of his adult life, because his brain was literally screaming that he was surrendering his authority.
But by starting small, just practicing short, direct apologies without the word but, he fundamentally shifted his marriage and his relationship with his kids. He had to neurologically unlearn the idea that accountability equals weakness, because it actually requires immense strength to hold space for someone else's hurt without making it about you.
It really does. Michael's story perfectly highlights the paralysis of apologizing, but we have to look at the exact opposite end of the spectrum, too. What about the people who apologize for absolutely everything?
The over-apologizers. Because society often conditions us, especially in the workplace and, especially certain demographics, to believe that being highly agreeable makes us likable. So why does the research say over-apologizing actually erodes trust instead of building it?
Because constant apologizing signals uncertainty, not accountability. There is this pervasive myth that apologizing constantly makes you seem kinder or more polite, but reflexive over-apologizing quietly destroys how much people trust your judgment.
Wait, really? It destroys trust in your judgment?
Yes. Think about it. If you apologize for having an opinion, or for taking up space, or for asking a basic question, you are signaling to others that you don't trust yourself. So over time, they subconsciously stop trusting you too.
So we have to distinguish between a genuine apology, which is about repairing a specific harm, and just appeasement.
Exactly. Appeasement is when you apologize just to end someone else's discomfort or anger. usually at the cost of your own dignity. It's essentially people-pleasing dressed up as accountability.
That brings us to Sarah's story from the text. She's a 31-year-old working in marketing, and she was apologizing over 20 times a day.
Yeah, she apologized for being 2 minutes late, for speaking up in a meeting, for just sending an email. Her coworkers noticed, and her apologies started to feel automatic and entirely meaningless.
Her turning point was incredibly practical, though. She started pausing before she spoke and asking herself one specific question. Did this action actually cause harm, or am I just uncomfortable with tension?
That pause is everything. It interrupted the reflex. It forced her prefrontal cortex back online to evaluate the reality of the situation. By stopping the over-apologizing, she found that her coworkers actually trusted her judgment more.
Because she wasn't constantly undermining herself.
Right. Her apologies became rare, which meant when she finally did apologize, it carried real, undeniable weight.
Whether you are someone like Michael, who avoids apologizing out of a fear of weakness, or someone like Sarah, who over-apologizes out of a fear of tension, these are deeply ingrained neural patterns. How do we actually rewire these habits in our brains and in our daily environments?
Well, behavioral psychology offers some really actionable, everyday strategies for rewiring those pathways. The first is to practice saying the words, "I was wrong," out loud in incredibly low-stakes situations.
I genuinely marveled at this specific strategy. The idea that admitting you were wrong about, say, a random trivia fact actually physically prepares your brain to apologize when you mess up in a high-stakes moment in your marriage.
Yeah, it's like muscle memory. You are proving to your brain that admitting fault doesn't result in death.
You are building the neural pathway before you need to walk down it in a storm.
Exactly. And another powerful habit is journaling about the apologies you have been actively avoiding. Writing it down pulls the narrative out of your amygdala and puts it on paper. It reduces the emotional charge and the shame surrounding the event, which makes the actual conversation much more approachable.
It also helps to separate your apology conversations from your conflict conversations, right? Like, don't try to resolve a heated argument and deliver a deep, vulnerable apology at the exact same time. Give each the breathing room it requires.
The physical environment matters immensely, too. You need to build a quiet buffer for yourself before you initiate this kind of conversation. Let your nervous system settle. Choose a calm, private setting where neither of you feels cornered.
And crucially, and I think everyone listening needs to hear this, reduce your phone notifications during these moments.
Oh, absolutely.
The dopamine-driven distraction of a buzzing phone literally reduces the depth of attention your brain has available for genuine repair. You cannot fully repair trust with someone while half your brain is anticipating a text message. It just shatters the non-verbal synchrony we talked about earlier.
It creates a shallow environment for an interaction that requires deep emotional resonance. All of these small habits, how you prepare your nervous system, turning off your phone, saying, "I was wrong about the little things," they quietly add up to rewire your baseline response to conflict.
So to bring all these threads together for you listening, apologizing isn't a confession that you are a fundamentally bad person. It's not a permanent stain on your identity. It is a learned, measurable skill.
And it is a physiological event that requires a regulated nervous system.
Exactly. And when done right, without the buts and the endless justifications, it is arguably the most powerful tool we have to build deeply resilient, long-lasting relationships.
It really is the foundational mechanism of trust itself.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that builds on all this science, but shifts the lens entirely onto how we interact with others. What if the way you receive apologies is actually dictating the kinds of apologies you get in life?
Oh, that's a powerful thought.
If you punish people, or act smug, or bring up old mistakes when they finally swallow their pride to say, "I'm sorry," you might be unknowingly training their nervous system to never, ever take that risk with you again. Think about that the next time someone offers you an imperfect apology. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.